Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's Dan Scarbrough here. I'm with Timme, the head of sustainability for the secure power and data center division at Schneider Electric. Hi, Anna. Nice to speak to you again. How are you doing?
Hey, Dan. I'm doing well. Thank you. And thanks for having me. Pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this conversation. I really enjoyed the first chat we had, and I think, you know, I've spoken to lots of people at within Schneider over the last few years, and I think the work that you're doing in this area that's very important and very dear to my heart, I think is really pushing the boundaries. So I'm excited to have this conversation and go into a bit more detail with you. Maybe just to start off with, if you could give us a bit of an introduction to you, your role, and kind of what it is that you're doing and how that ties into the wider Schneider, because I know you're only looking after this particular division. So if you could maybe cover that off, that'd be great.
Yeah, it sounds like a good enough place, if anywhere, to get started. So I'm the head of sustainability for Schneider Electric's secure power and data center business. So in the past year and a half, I've built the organization from the ground up, and we're really focusing on two different areas. One is around executing Schneider Electric's very ambitious Scope 3 reduction goals, which must be executed across all Schneider Electric divisions, because we own offers, we develop, produce, and ship offers to our customers, and it's up to us to slash the Scope 3 of those offers. And then another part of my team is laser focused on enabling those solutions for our customers. So hyperscale data centers, co-location, absolutely, but also the whole exploding world of distributed IT and edge. So yeah, that's what my team does, and how I fit into the larger world of Schneider sustainability.
Which is really interesting because, you know, you must have some very strong shoulders there, and like carrying the weight with you. But, you know, I know Schneider's been quite involved in this process for a long period of time. And, you know, I wanted to kind of get your initial take on the actual concept of becoming 100% net zero or carbon zero, and how realistic that is, and some of the claims that are out there within this particular sector, and how, you know, either real or misleading you feel that those claims might well be.
Sounds like a perfect place to start. So maybe let's start out with level setting on net zero and zero carbon. To me, they're slightly different, potentially not massively different. But to me, there is a pretty core difference. I mean, the word net means there's something you're not reducing at the end of the world. Zero carbon means literally zero carbon. So, you know, for me, I think all companies should be targeting at least net zero goals, preferably aligned with SBTi's corporate net zero standard. But let's just pause on sort of what that means. First, it must include all emissions, including Scope 3. So a lot of companies do tend to start, I think understandably, rightfully so, on their own operations, their Scope 1 and Scope 2. So first, whether it be net zero or zero carbon, you must actually include all three scopes of emissions. Two, for net zero, I mean, it really does mean reduce to as close to zero as possible. But I think in our day and age, it's almost inevitable that there will be some remaining residual emissions that simply cannot be reduced, at least not yet. So in that case, those residual emissions do need to be ideally reabsorbed through, you know, our natural carbon sinks, our oceans, our forests, et cetera. But of course, we all know that that's wildly out of balance. So from a company perspective, those residual emissions should be sequestered by all means, by carbon credits, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit later, but specifically sequestered, not avoided. So for me, that's net zero. For carbon zero instead, I think it's a little different because it really is zero. And today, I'm probably aware of only one scenario. Let's see, if someone were to be able to provide carbon zero infrastructure today, I'm just trying to reflect on what that could look like. I think today that would look like two things. One, in their own operations, obviously 100% renewable energy. Boom. Okay, get rid of all of your scope 2 emissions. It's the embodied part. It's everything coming from the supply chain that is not so easy to reduce today. So I guess the only scenario today in which that could be possible would be through refurbished. Everything secondhand, everything refurbished, nothing coming from virgin material, and all of the processes of refurbishing that equipment and redistributing that equipment has to be run on 100% renewable energy. That's the only way I can imagine that coming to life today.
I think what I was kind of trying to get at with the question is, you know, is it realistic, and how, you know, how much of it is people saying that they're doing it, but it's really, I mean, it's very, very difficult to do, isn't it? It's so, you know, do we feel like everyone's being honest with themselves about where they are and what the journey looks like? Or do you feel like there's a certain amount of, you know, kind of misleading? And first and foremost, I should say to you that I'm a big believer in the industry, and I think our industry is great, and I think we're pushing boundaries in huge ways that I think we're going to cover later on in the conversation. But you know, when I speak to lots of people, you know, the comments that I get back is, oh, we're zero carbon, or this is zero carbon, or that's zero carbon, or yes, we're on our way to zero carbon. It seems to be thrown around quite, you know, with not necessarily fully understanding what that means and how hard it is to do. Yeah. And it's almost like we buy 100% renewable energy credits and we're, you know, we're on our way. You know what I mean?
They are on their way. I will absolutely say yes. That's part of the journey. Have they reached the journey's end? By no means, I mean, at all. So let me touch on your first part. You said something, you know, is it realistic? 100% yes. It is realistic. We have the technology, the know-how to do this today. It's not really completely rocket science. Doesn't necessarily mean a country or a company can implement it today for tomorrow. So it's not necessarily that easy to implement. So it is doable. It is realistic. The second part of your question was around, you know, are people potentially exaggerating their claims? Absolutely. There's a lot of folks. I would tend to say more outside of the digital infrastructure space that do exaggerate their claims. When we see it when we go into the grocery store every day, people talking about green products. It just makes me, as a sustainability professional, more than often, you know, really roll my eyes at those. But I don't think most folks, I'm not aware of any digital infrastructure provider today that's claiming net zero or carbon zero infrastructure, whether it be cloud services or, you know, co-location services that truly encompass Scope 3 as well.
No, and I'd 100% agree with you. And when you look at, you know, the challenges of the, you know, component level from an IT perspective, it's pretty hard. But I think I absolutely am excited that you're saying it's realistic, right? As someone who's in that space, and I'm absolutely excited about trying to get that realism into a process that organizations can follow. And I think, again, we're going to cover that shortly. And I believe that's something that you guys are, you know, that's something that you're trying to do for the industry as a business, which I'm really excited about. So maybe, you know, what might be a good place to start from that standpoint is if you take me through Schneider's journey your kind of targets and how you're paving the way, if you like, for being able to do this not only for yourself but for your customers and for the sector, or give the sector the ability to follow that trajectory if they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. So where should I start on Schneider Electric's journey? So, I think first off, I've been saying we started this 15 years ago for a long time. And actually, as I was preparing for this interview, it's actually 18 years. So I need to update my own narrative that runs through my brain. But, Schneider Electric's net zero journey, first and foremost, is part of our broader sustainability strategy, which we have focused to really be focused on creating a more sustainable and equitable future for all. So really across the whole ESG spectrum, of course. In 2005, is 18 years ago, we were the first company in the world to monitor our impact on people, on planet, on profit, and establish I absolutely believe the industry leading sustainability, what we used to call barometer, what we now call our Schneider Sustainability Impact. So our current SSI, Schneider Sustainability Impact, is a program that runs through 2025, and then we will reiterate it. We will relaunch it with new, more ambitious actions, ambitious goals. Our current impact has 11 global targets and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of local initiatives on top of that. But to bring us back to net zero, we have also had a solid carbon pledge for quite some time now, aligned with SBTi, but recently, just last year, we refined those goals to adhere to SBTi's latest and first ever corporate net zero standards. So we are solidly on track, and we're targeting full net zero across our entire value chain, so 100%, including scope 3, both upstream and downstream, by 2050. And then part of that plan, of course, there's also all these different milestones. If we just look at our operations, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2025, net zero ready, not net zero, we're going to say net zero ready, we're just in our operations, by 2030. But 2030 also brings us another really key milestone that's really near and dear to me for what I do here in Secure Power, and that's an overall 25% reduction of our carbon footprint by 2030. After that, we're going to get to carbon neutral across our full value chain by 2040 to get us to our goal by 2050. But I think it's worth maybe putting some context, putting some perspective over what this means for Schneider Electric right now. 99.6 of Schneider Electric's carbon footprint is scope 3. So we have a lot of focus on eliminating those emissions from our operations, but when you put it next to scope 3, it's actually really quite minuscule. So we're going to do that in our own operations. That's why my focus is absolutely on scope 3. So if we look at that, 99.6 is on scope 3. We take that pie, 90% is downstream, which is mainly use of our products by our customers. And then roughly about 10%, and it varies according to division, according to product line, but it's pretty aligned with what we have here in Secure Power. 10% is upstream, so that's all the embodied carbon related to our supply chain. So that 25% reduction goal by 2030 is targeting all the indirect emissions that occur outside of our four walls. That doesn't mean we can't address them, though, and we absolutely are. I think there's two main ways we address this. One is elevating carbon reduction into a key design priority in all of our new products. And that goes both upstream and downstream. So we are developing the tools and the modeling capability on how to design differently, to make design decisions, I would say differently, make sure we have the data available to make those decisions to ensure that the next generation's carbon footprint has a reduction. So and then, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to try, so I'm just trying to get my head around this, right? Because there is certainly confusion around the scopes upstream, downstream. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I understand that from a supply side, but when you say 90% is within your customers, so how would that work, and how would you be able to reduce that? Can you just give me a very basic example for me to get my head around? Because these sites are being built now, right? And with the amount of capacity that you're seeing is unprecedented. You know, I mean, I think ChatGPT, which just come online, this AI, they reached something like 100 million users in 2 months. I heard yesterday that one of the other hyperscalers equivalent is forecasting 7.5 gigawatts of power to be consumed by their AI engine, right? Yeah. And these sites are being built now predominantly with air, so they're predominantly air-cooled sites, no heat reuse, etc. They're being built to last for, I don't know, 15 years at the minimum. So what is that 90% of the Scope 3 that is on the customer side?
Yeah, so there's two main levers that we can pull to address that. One is efficiency. Drive ever more efficiency of our products. We all know that, you know, most UPSs, not only Schneider's UPSs, cooling, you know, UPSs specifically are already very efficient. Yeah. But we will continue squeaking more and more efficiency out of that. The other part of it is going to be pure innovation on what data center infrastructure looks like in the future, but that's what we don't know about the future. So one is efficiency of products and systems. Two, it's grid decarbonization at the end of the day. Because, you know, I think the way, you know, when Schneider Electric, we report our emissions, we sold a product in X country, and we report those emissions based off the country's grid's carbon intensity. So I personally think we probably even overstate our carbon footprint a little bit, because, you know, we sell obviously a lot of equipment into digital infrastructure, and a lot of digital infrastructure providers are already on renewable energy. But those are the two areas we can play. We can drive more efficiency and help our ecosystem, our industry shift to renewable energy, which will then in turn accelerate grid decarbonization. Those are the biggest two levers we can pull.
And until the industry has moved to 100% renewable energy across the markets that you're supplying your products to, that your Scope 3 emissions up within your customers will continue to exist. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. But even this hypothesis that the entire digital infrastructure industry shifts to 100% renewable energy, they're sourcing renewable energy through the various uses available. I'm not sure yet that would mean Schneider Electric's downstream Scope 3 is going to disappear. It also depends on how carbon accounting methodologies evolve, because I can just imagine the complexity of reporting our downstream use emissions based on who we sold the equipment to. That's quite I have a hard time wrapping my brain even how any company would report on that. Maybe a company who just sells to digital infrastructure, sure, but Schneider Electric sells to every single possible industry and sector that exists on planet Earth. So currently, we report our emissions based on the country grid carbon intensity number. But that said, the more digital infrastructure providers shift to renewable energy, I think the faster and the more demand ramps up for that, I think absolutely the faster country grids will decarbonize as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that how you calculate it is almost as complicated as, you know, transitioning in that direction. I was talking to another guy actually day before yesterday, and he was saying that I think, we speak to quite a few of the operators, and the ability for the grid to keep up with the data center consumption is starting to go way beyond any realms of possibility, right? And, you know, it's probably, you know, when you look at the future consumption of data versus the requirements of power, the relationship between the data center infrastructure and the grid is going to need to change. And they're almost overtaking, well, they are overtaking, you know, the power supply, right? So you've got hyperscale operators that are looking at doing, you know, off-site power production, their own power generating assets, not connected to the grid because the grid can't keep up with them. So you could see a world, you could see a future within this sector that they almost start operating independently of the grid. And they almost become their own grid using, you know, fuel cells, nuclear energy. And as that transition happens, you know, it's not beyond all thought process that we could get to 100% renewable digital infrastructure. Because if you look at it from a reliance on the grid to provide 100% renewable,
yeah, it's not going to happen in the short term.
as being possible. So one of the things that I wanted to cover with you is the drivers that you're seeing, and you know how real they are. You know, and what they're, whether they are actually culminating in this being a more important issue than shareholders' return, should we say, right? So if you think about from your interaction within the global industry and your position within Schneider, what do you think the key drivers are? And you don't have to answer them both at the same time, but can you honestly say that sustainability is more important now than, you know, shareholder return? Or is it, at what point is that going to, you know, what point is it going to get over? Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you, yeah, you know the question I'm asking you, don't you?
I think I get it. So well, let's start with the drivers. Okay. As a sustainability professional, I'd be remiss not to state the obvious, so I am going to do that. You know, I think a lot of companies, such as Schneider, are motivated by corporate social responsibility and really fundamentally wanting to do their part to curb climate change. That is a driver for a lot of companies, not all companies, of course, but it is. It's not a question about what we do between now and 2050 to curb global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. It's really crucial what we do between now and 2030, because in order to curb that trajectory, we need to slash global emissions in half by 2030. So that is a driver. But if we part the do the right thing for the future of the human race, there are four main drivers that are really pushing colo players to act. I'll start on colos first, but I think this is applicable to anyone providing digital infrastructure, and those are their customer requirements. I mean, we hear again and again that our customers are demanding solid action on sustainability. So about 3 years ago, yeah, about 2020, we commissioned a study, and it was with 451 Research to really understand the dynamic. And I was shocked that in 2020, a resounding 96% of providers of digital infrastructure do require contractually binding sustainability commitments. That said, there's a pretty big variety of what those commitments could look like, and aren't necessarily production. Yeah.
Can I just ask you one question on that?
Yeah.
This is one of the things that I find quite challenging, is that, and I work with quite a few of the colo operators, they do require the binding commitment, right? But they don't change their contractual SLAs. They don't change their resiliency requirements, but they are expecting you to be, you know, so they're almost giving you £20 and then punching you in the face. You know what I mean? Or it doesn't. So what would you say about that side of things?
So it was, to your point, I think it was that is great to hear, but I think it's quite obvious that that's not really what's happening. I think it depends on what they get back. If someone sends out an RFP for colo space, they can make all the demands they want in the world, but if the providers' infrastructure, the provider communities aren't in a position yet to provide a certain level of sustainability, they're going to buy their space anyway.
Yeah.
So, but one thing I did, I want to cite a more recent study though as well. Just last year, we commissioned Forrester Consulting, and one of the biggest takeaways that really floored me there is that 75% of respondents said that they had lost business or investment due to not having sustainability programs in place. And that floored me. That's actually, I mean, I expected it to be, I don't know, got maybe 50%, but 75% say they're already losing business due to not having sustainability programs in place. So, I mean, end user requirements are there. Are they integrating it into all their contracts and all their SLAs? No, not yet. Is it even across the world? No, not at all. Are there a lot of folks who aren't feeling this yet? I believe so, but not believing that it's coming, I think is quite a dangerous place to be. If that's someone's position. So,
I mean, I think that over the next few years, it will become more onerous.
Yeah.
But it's like the renewable energy credits or guarantees of origin that make the power renewable, right? When you think of the percentage cost associated with a kilowatt and the amount of that price attached to the documentation versus the energy generation is quite a small amount of the total cost. If it was a larger amount of the total cost, if the documentation or the actual renewable attributes was a larger amount, I think it would have a bigger impact, on net new renewable energy generating. So I think my kind of challenge with some of the things that you see is, the expectations to remove all diesel generators by a certain point in time for like a hyperscale operator, that then all of a sudden transitions to their supply chain. But and then they might be using HVO, which lots of these. So it's the game of smoke and mirrors that I find quite challenging, because it would be nice if we as an industry, and I think we're going to cover this a bit later on, could categorize these things into real, not real, is happening, isn't happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I find a bit strange, but I'm assuming that from the regulation, that is another one of the drivers, as that regulation comes through, that might force a bit more better.
Absolutely.
How that happens.
Yeah, I mean, aside from customer requirements, I mean, regulation will come through. It already is coming through. And what we're seeing is not only the growth of regulation, but the disharmonization in regulation. Not even, between regions, yes, but even within regions, even like within a country. I'm in the United States right now, and there's a lot of different levels of regulation coming from different states. So that's another thing that especially providers of digital infrastructure that play at a global level, they see this disharmonization and this growth of regulation, and the most efficient way to approach it is to take the highest level of regulation and get your data center designed to meet that, and then execute that everywhere, even if it's not required. We talk about end users, regulation. The other one is investors. There's a recent announcement from Vantage. who recently secured 2 construction loans to advance campuses. Let's see if I can remember. One was up in Canada, and I think the other one was in Northern Virginia. And their investor did require formal documentation of environmental impact objectives before granting those loans. And those objectives did require, their net zero roadmap, their ISO certifications, PUE calculations, the global warming potential, so their carbon impact, et cetera, et cetera. So we're starting to see concrete examples where co-location companies are securing more investment / better investment thanks to their concrete efforts around sustainability.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. I suppose the question is that what you would like to think is that they could almost, hopefully at some point in the future, make more money by doing it as well, right? And that it makes more commercial sense to them. But do you think we've reached that point where it still makes more commercial sense, or are we there yet?
I honestly think yes. Does that mean that today for tomorrow, every single sustainability investment will cost less than not doing it? No, not necessarily. But I don't think it's the either or. It's not do sustainability or stay profitable. I don't think it's that clear anymore. I think if any company wants to be profitable and resilient also in the long term, it just has to be, it really just has to be. I mean, if I go back to the Forrester research, I mean, if 75% of companies have already lost business due to not having strong programs in place, I mean, companies can continue not having programs in place. They're going to continue to lose business, and their shareholders aren't going to be happy about that as well. Another stat that came out of that links back to investment again. 83% of respondents say that they have used sustainability also to attract new business. So it means maybe looking at the same side of the coin, but it's just another stat that backs that up. So I don't know. I don't see it as an either or anymore. Yes, some sustainability issues do require investment that may make some shareholders pause, but I think the business case is really simple. I
think the power costs are having a big impact, right? The increasing energy prices, because historically the green premium that you might pay for something, right, was you're almost paying more for it being green than not being green. And you're now, from a power pricing perspective, it's starting to, the cost of energy, especially in Europe, is driving up it's making, on-site renewables more viable. It's making a lot of hydrogen, it's making the search for that type of next clean energy generation more viable because of the price of the. So there's that. But no, I would agree with you. I would agree with you.